Hello, and welcome to Crime and Crochet. I'm Stacy,
I'm Amanda.
and today we're crocheting and talking about true crime, two of our favorite things to do, and we love to do it together.
Absolutely.
So show us what you're crocheting.
So today I'm making a blanket and it's going to look like this. And I'm going to be crocheting the little motifs that go in here. And this is a snowflake blanket I got from Yarn Inspirations. And it's going to be really cute.
I love it, and the yarn is really soft. It's the Karen Simply Soft.
That is my favorite yarn. It is so soft.
It's
amazing.
Lovely, isn't it? I'm doing a dishcloth. It's kind of like a round one with the wedges, very similar to the knitted one. I think a lady looked at the knitted one and decided to make one for crochet, which
Crocheting is amazing.
Because crochet is amazing. I also knit, but the crochet goes really much quicker, and you can whip one of these out much quicker. And it's made out of the cotton. This is Crafter's Secret from Hobby Lobby. You can also use the sugar and cream or the peaches and cream. I love this cotton from Hobby Lobby. It makes a nice soft one, like for a facial cloth or for a bathroom cloth. These make a nice one for the kitchen. I've been doing Christmas patterns since Christmas because I'm going to get ahead this year, I said. Last year I made...
I've always wanted to do that, but it just...
doesn't ever work out, does it?
It doesn't.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I've got a few done, so hopefully I want to have enough to give everybody 2. So that means I'll probably want to do like about 200 of them. So if I'm going to do it, and every time I go to the store and see some Christmassy looking yarn, I pick it up.
So who are we talking about today, Stacy?
Jeffrey McDonald. Actually, I'm going to mention first Colette, Kimberly, and Kristen McDonald, because I feel like the victims are more important than the murderer. I think that so often, people know who the murderers are. They don't know about the victims. And those are the people who were good people living their lives doing what they did. And it's sad. The victims, yes. Jeffrey McDonald was a Green Beret and a doctor. And on the night of February 16th to the 17th in 1970, his wife, Colette, who was not yet 26 and pregnant with a little boy, her 2 daughters, also his daughters, Kimberly, who was 5, and Kristen, that was 2. And they were bludgeoned and stabbed. They had many wounds. It was really overkill. He said they were attacked by a satanic cult who came in saying, acid is groovy, kill the pigs, and that he fought with them, but they...
Is acid groovy?
I'm pretty sure it's not.
I mean...
And they subdued him without killing him. He ended up with a wound on his forehead. I don't believe he truly had a concussion. And a small, about 1-inch stab wound is between the 7th and 8th rib. There would be the least amount of pain.
Oh. Doctors would know that.
It was in a Vanity Fair article from the 90s, having his case looked at again. It has been said that this case has been the most litigated case in courts of any murder, because they've kept going back and going back.
Because he was convicted and he doesn't want to admit to doing it. And he's been in jail and been let out.
And put back in. He had cuts and bruises, fingernail scratches to his face and chest, none requiring stitches. He did have a mild concussion, according to the Womack Army Medical Center, and a single stab wound between 2 ribs on the right, described by staff surgeon as clean, small, sharp incision, 5/8 inches in depth.
Okay, so he had these minor injuries, but his family was brutally murdered.
Yes. And this was about 6 months after the Charles Manson murders of Sharon Tate and them. That was very much big in the news.
Very much.
I'll go into Colette's wounds.
Okay.
She was found in the master bedroom floor, clubbed about her body, both forearms broken from what they felt was defensive wounds.
Yeah.
Stabbed 21 times in the chest with an ice pick, 16 times in the neck and chest with a knife, severed her trachea in 2 places. And she was approximately 5 months pregnant with a little boy.
Right. So the acid that these perpetrators were taking
led them to do some small...
Totally just let them totally take out everything on her and the kids, but nothing on him pretty much.
Kimberly was found in her bed, bludgeoned head and body, stabbed 8 to 10 times in the neck, skull fracture from at least 2 blows to the right side of her head. Her cheekbone was protruding from the skin. The head wounds were severe and would have caused coma, with death following soon after she was struck.
Oh, that poor baby.
Kristen was 2, and she was found in her bed with a bottle of chocolate milk.
Yes.
She was stabbed 33 times, chest and neck, hands, and back with a knife, and 15 times with an ice pick. 2 knife wounds penetrated her heart. The ice pick wounds were shallow. The word pig was written in Colette's blood on the headboard.
Pig.
Well, that was also a imitation of the Charles Manson murders. But yeah, that's what that was. Jeffrey McDonald was in the hospital for 9 days, and he ended up having a chest tube.
Okay. For the injuries he had, today he would have probably been treated and released maybe an overnight stay.
He ended up having a
Just
chest
to
tube.
put it in perspective.
But in the 1970s, I think they decided to do it because he went from 20% to 30% pneumo from what I was reading. Mm-hmm. And he was a doctor, and as you and I both know, they jump on medical people quicker because they don't want to get in trouble for not doing something.
Right.
Count has remained the same since 1970. That 4 intruders, 2 white men, 1 black man, hippie types, and a white woman with blonde hair, a floppy hat, and boots killed his wife and children.
So he's totally stuck to his story.
Yes. I think the thing for most of us is, and you compare it to other cases that you see about it today, of people who are saying that they were attacked, and if it's the strongest male left alive and everybody else killed, I think we tend to look at that strongest male.
Right, because why would they leave
the biggest threat alive?
Right, but I mean, they were on acid. So when you're on an acid trip, I'm not speaking from experience because I've never done acid, but you hallucinate. I'm playing devil's advocate here. Maybe they hallucinated that the wife and kids were demons or something, and they had to be destroyed.
I'm thinking that's kind of what he would like for people to believe. He's married now, a woman he's been married to since the 90s, who's still saying he's innocent. He's a subject of a book and a Netflix documentary by Errol Morris, A Wilderness of Error, that likes to believe he was innocent.
There's a couple books, isn't there?
There's Fatal Vision by Joe McGinnis, who wrote it back in the day. He was embedded with Jeffrey McDonald. Jeffrey McDonald went and recruited him to write a book about him. And he was in there with him after going through the trial and everything, came to the conclusion that he was guilty and wrote his book that way.
Did they ever find any suspects? I mean,
there was a lady named Helena Stockley, and she had a boyfriend named Gregory Mitchell, and they were suspected, and they were kind of followed up on. Helena would confess and recant and confess. She had a drug history. She did a lot of drugs. She did have a blonde wig and a floppy hat, but and boots. But as they say, it was 1970. A lot of people had floppy boots, blonde wigs, and boot and hats and everything. So she had that. They followed up on this, and they never could find any actual evidence that they were in his house. It was raining. There was no footprints from boots or anything coming in the house.
Did they find any evidence outside the house?
They found the weapons outside the house, but they didn't find any fingerprints on anything. So people who were messed up on acid thought to either wear gloves or wipe their fingerprints off. They found the one paring knife, and he was very careful to say, "Tell the MPs I pulled it out of Colette." That it had his fingerprints on it, and it was laying in the bedroom.
Okay.
Paring knife.
All right.
That belonged to them at the house.
And he was an emergency room physician.
Yes.
He would have known that you don't remove any kind of
anything.
foreign object.
Yeah.
In the field, like you do that in the hospital.
Yeah, because when you pull that out, that could be holding whatever.
It could be putting pressure on
on
blood,
some vessel that keeping you from
an
bleeding out.
artery. I mean, it could be keeping her lung expanded.
I don't know. And I'm pretty sure they knew that in 1970. I know they weren't as advanced as we are today, but
yes, but that's something you learn at wartime, you know. And
he was in the Army.
Been to war.
We were at war at the time. We were in Vietnam. He was.
It's something that you learn there.
Quickly, yes. So he was very quick to point out that he pulled that knife out of her chest.
However, okay, playing devil's advocate again.
Yes.
When you see your wife, your pregnant wife, laying on the floor with a knife in her chest, and you've been attacked as well, your brain doesn't comprehend that, you know, you don't go into doctor mode, nurse mode, you know, medical mode. That's your wife. So I think it would be my first instinct
to pull it out.
To pull it out. If it was my husband laying there. I don't know. I've never been in that situation, so I can't really speak to it. But it's something that is possible.
Then again, you might go into doctor or nurse mode as to say, I've not had anybody seriously injured in my family around me.
Right.
But I have had them have some injuries. And generally, I just push out the personal. I push out the...
Right.
You know, this is my family, whatever. And I go into that mode. And he said he went around and tried CPR.
Right.
And they just did nothing but bubble. And so then he stopped. So, you know, if he went into that mode enough to try CPR, you would think maybe he wouldn't have pulled the knife out.
Right.
I think he pulled the knife out myself because he put the knife in. And he pulled it out and he put it in again several times. One thing I heard, a podcaster was covering another case, but talking about someone, a family that was murdered in their home by an intruder. And she said, and I just want y'all to know that this does happen. Intruders can come in and kill people, and, you know, it's not always the family members, and, you know, and that's
Absolutely.
what people think. And this is why Jeffrey McDonald's in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to suggest, though, that she is thinking from 2022, where we know more about domestic violence. We've watched enough true crime. You know, our first thought is, who's the closest person to them? When someone is killed, one of the first people we all look at is the immediate family and spouses, and that's because more often than not it is.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to say in 1970, right after the Charles Manson murders, that's not how people thought about it. Domestic violence was not as talked about.
It existed.
It existed, but people thought they were the only ones.
Right. Because nobody talked about their husband or even wife
abusing them. Yeah. Child abuse was not very well known at the time. But, you know, as I said, I feel like that back then, for the investigators to come to this conclusion that it was him instead of intruders was not something that they easily did. I think that when they went in, they all were thinking, oh, it's this thing again, people were primed for it after the Charles Manson murders. People were frightened.
And they didn't handle the whole evidence thing very well.
The crime scene was
Contaminated.
yes, even by 1970 standards.
Right.
By our standards today, but you know, I feel like by our standards today, if they went in and halfway did a job, we would know for sure. We'd have DNA and everything. As it is,
Right.
we do have the fact that all 4 members had different blood types.
Which is crazy.
Really, it is, isn't it?
It is.
How often does that happen?
Crazy.
As they went from room to room, finding out what the blood types were and putting that evidence together, they were pretty much able to piece together a fairly good theory about what happened. They feel like it started in the bedroom. He said that the baby, Kristen, had wet the bed, that he just picked her up and carried her back to her bed and went to sleep on the couch. He didn't want to wake up his pregnant wife to change the sheets. It was found later that it was Kimberly that wet the bed, that he became angry since she was 5 years old and still wet in the bed. They feel like that Colette probably confronted him about it. She had been to a psychology class earlier that evening and they had discussed it.
So she was going to college.
She had started college and then she'd gotten pregnant and they were married with Kimberly. And he was in medical school. She was taking care of the children. He joined the Army, went to the Green Berets, and then she was taking evening classes.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd been to an evening class, and the discussion actually was about children bedwetting. And they feel like that she probably confronted him about it, perhaps threatened his masculinity. He was very sensitive about that. And a fight ensued. There was a piece of wood that had been used to make bed slats, I think, in the bedroom, like an extra piece laying there. They think she hit him either with it or with a hairbrush, and he took either the club away from her or picked it up. And they feel like he threw it back to hit her, and when he did, he got Kimberly
Instead.
And that's why they said the head wound were severe, would have caused coma and death soon after. So
he was like really like slung it back to like really
real strong. And some speculate that he knew at that point
he was going to jail.
That it was pretty much over for him. There's also been said that he was pretty much sleep deprived. He had been taking diet pills, strong ones, because it was 1970.
Right, which is like amphetamine.
Amphetamine, yeah, speed. And he had like worked all night in an ER. He had come back and worked all day at his Army job as like a doctor for his platoon. And then he had come home and they'd had supper, and then Colette went off to her class.
And left him with the children.
Yes. But from what I understand, he kind of laid down on the couch and went to sleep while they kind of just played around him, which sounds like 1970 to me also. And then Kimberly woke him up to watch Laugh-In or something, because they like to watch it together, is his story. Then he put her to bed, and then the baby woke up, he gave her chocolate milk in a bottle, and his wife came home, and it goes from there. I know they found one footprint in Kimberly's room that was bloody, and it was the size of his foot.
Right. If his story was true, and he went in and checked on his daughters,
that could
have caused the bloody footprint. However, he had been stabbed, but his blood was only in front of the sink.
In front of the sink, I want to say the bathroom. Another thing is...
Which is kind of strange. But
well, if you were going to stab yourself...
You'd absolutely need a mirror to like count ribs and, whatever, but...
He, in his telling about what happened, said he had his pajama top on, that it was pulled off over his head, and he was struggling with it stuck on his wrists.
And that's when he was stabbed.
And clubbed. And he said that, it had knocked him out, and then they went and killed his family.
In their drug-fueled haze, they could have thought that he was dead.
Perhaps. Perhaps.
I mean, if his story was true.
Now, there were no threads found in the living room where he said he struggled. There was very little disturbance, and that was the first thing that started the investigators from the Army thinking that that maybe this didn't go down the way he explained it, because there was a lack of destruction around. They're like, this doesn't look like a Green Beret struggled with intruders here.
Right. So he was tried in the military.
But they brought charges up against him, and he had a lawyer, Bernie Siegel, who came and poked holes in where the investigators had messed up the crime scene, and so they dismissed the charges.
But he got out of the military.
He left the military after that. Then he went on the Dick Cavett show, which did him no favors with his father-in-law, and probably pretty much
sealed his fate.
Pretty much, because after that his father-in-law began to consider him. Freddie Kassab was his stepfather-in-law. Freddie Kassab had lost his first wife and child in World War II in Europe. And then he had come to America and began to work, and he married Colette's mother, and she had a son and daughter, and her first husband had committed suicide. He became very close with her children and became a very much a father to them. I think he felt like Colette sort of replaced his daughter that he had lost. He was very close with her and very loving, and they adored their granddaughters. And when this happened, they totally believed Jeffrey McDonald. They thought that the Army was giving him a raw deal. Freddie Kassab testified for him.
Right, there was no way he could have done this.
No way he would have done this. He loved them. He wanted to find the people who did do it, and he was very driven to do that. One other thing that Jeffrey McDonald did that was not smart was he told Freddie Kassab that him and some of his Green Beret buddies found a guy that was involved in it. They found him in a bar. They took him out and questioned him about it, figured out that he had done it, and killed him. And he said he's 6 foot under, they'll never find him.
Right. That was a lie that should have never been told.
He said later it was a lie, and that he made it up just to get Freddie off of his back because he was relentless.
Right.
And he wanted to move on with his life.
He was ready to leave the wife and kids behind because he was guilty. He wanted.
Pretty much, yes. He made it sound like, well, I just wanted to live my life. That's not wrong. But
it's not right either.
No. I think Freddie could pretty much tell that was a lie from the beginning. Then he went on the Dick Cavett show, and just his behavior.
Right.
Not necessarily what he said, but how he said it. There was a lack of grief, of morose, and I know everybody deals with that differently, and you can't always go by that.
Of just, like, emotions.
It was very cavalier. He had that, like, fool you grin. Really makes me think a lot of Chris Watts. Like when he was on TV and stuff, and trying to spin his little web there.
Right. He went to trial and was convicted.
He didn't go to trial till 1979.
Like,
they had a hard time
9 years later.
They had a hard time finding somebody that would try it. They didn't see it as a thing that was winnable. And it wasn't so much that they didn't think he was guilty, as that they didn't see.
They didn't think they had the evidence.
They didn't think they had the evidence. They didn't feel like it was winnable. He was handsome. He was all-American. He was a doctor. He had been a Green Beret. He was, had all that going for him. And I kind of think that's the thing that made him think he could get away with it. Is I feel like he probably got away with stuff his whole life.
Right.
He was a serial cheater.
So,
which a lot of serial cheaters don't kill their families.
Right. But him and Colette met in high school. Correct?
Correct.
They dated.
They grew up
what
together.
creeps me out is, even after they broke up, he would still come by the house and mow the grass.
Yes.
Like, stalkerish.
Yes,
like,
I'll
by
say
today's
so.
standards. Like, we would question that.
Now today
it's
we
like,
would.
dude, go away.
Back then they thought, what a wonderful guy.
Right.
One thing too, he had a girlfriend in high school. Him and Colette were kind of broke up for a while, and he had this one girlfriend in high school and then early part of college, and this is according to him. Her name was Penny. They had a very tumultuous sex life. She was, very attractive, he said, very sexual. They, just were going at it. Having fun. McGinnis does say in his book later on that while he was married to Colette, that he snuck up to visit Penny and took her lingerie and stuff, and they were still having a thing go on.
Yeah, I think him and Penny never
really quit.
stopped.
When he's describing his relationship with Penny and his relationship with Colette, you hear him talk about her. Well, she was going to be a dental hygienist, and he said, and that's just, not this. We weren't on the same level intellectually, and that Colette wrote him. That Penny would write him letters, but they were just kind of really flat and shallow, and Colette would write him things that were deeper and da-da-da. And I really think, though, the thing is that Colette was from a higher social level than him.
Socioeconomical.
And her family had some hard times financially, but they were still of that class. And he was from a more working class, but he was being upwardly mobile by, going to medical school and becoming a doctor, and she would be the right wife for him.
Right.
And I think
that's to have the right wife.
And I think that's how he saw her. I really do. I think she was his upward mobility.
So what year was he convicted?
1979. He was convicted August 29th, 1 count of first-degree murder for Kristen, and 2 counts of second-degree murder for Colette and Kimberly. They said that the jury felt that he murdered Colette and Kimberly in a heat of passion and anger, but when he went to murder Kristen, because she had been in her bed and had not been in the middle of it, it was a calculated act.
Right, because of the wounds, the difference in the wounds. Correct?
Correct. She had several stab wounds and everything, but they said that the 2 knife wounds that penetrated her heart were the first
precision.
Wounds. They were precision. They went right to the heart, like a doctor would know to do, and also a Green Beret. And it was like he killed her quickly so she wouldn't suffer.
Right.
And then inflicted the other wounds to make it look like this was
not like
an attack.
Colette, who had all the different
all the defensive
stab wounds and defensive wounds.
And
or the other little girl, what was her name?
Kimberly.
Who they got hit in the head. They thought that was an accident.
They think he killed her with accidentally at first.
Right.
First wounds, and then he went through and did the stab wounds on them to make it
more believable. Make his story believable.
The way they found the blood in the different rooms, they feel that he thought he had killed Colette when he was in there killing Kristen, and she had come to and went in there to protect her, and he attacked her again and drug her back to the bedroom on a sheet.
Because they found a pool of her blood by the bed.
I do feel like that if this had happened nowadays, that, just looking at the Chris Watts case and the way they found what evidence they found, and, with DNA and everything.
Have they ever tried to do DNA?
They have, but all they had was because, the evidence was so old, there was a blonde hair that was under one of the girl's fingernails, and they did DNA on it, and it belongs to nobody in the family.
So one of the girls had a blonde hair under her fingernail?
And he's tried to use it for defense.
It gives credence to his story.
His blonde woman story.
Yes.
It kind of does. It kind of does. However,
but
there's nothing
that have come from just contact.
As the prosecutors had said, and I think I read this in the Vanity Fair article, they said that they were ready to argue that hair could have come from anywhere, from anybody at almost any time. not necessarily related to the crime scene.
Okay.
But, you know, that could, I mean, he could have given him some credence.
So, which girl, because it would make a difference to me as a juror.
Yeah.
Whether it was the girl up walking around that got hit in the head, or the girl in the bed asleep. That would make a big difference. Because if it's the girl up walking around, you're usually not going to keep a hair
under your nail
if you're up moving. But if you're in the bed and it's like on you,
yeah,
and it gets under your nail, you're not up moving around.
You're not getting rid of it.
I think that they should like really explore this hair.
This hair?
Like, that's, to me, that's something. It gives his story a little more believability.
There are things that you can look at and kind of give him a little bit of credence here and there. One thing is, and I think, I can't remember who it was that wrote this about it, the thing that makes him look innocent is he's never changed his story. And the thing that makes him look guilty is he's never changed his story.
Right.
Looks like it was found on the younger one, that Kristen that was in the bed.
Who was probably sleeping
when he went in.
When she was murdered. She probably was not awake. Is that correct?
Mm-mm. She was not. But
she could have been, because they say the mother supposedly went in there to try to protect her and was attacked again.
There's a 5mm hair fragment found in the fingernail scrapings of Kristen, the youngest one. The hairs are naturally shed, and the government has convincingly argued that the hair in Kristen's fingernail scrapings was the result of lab contamination.
Oh, so lab tech.
That's what it looks like according to McDonald case, just the facts, DNA evidence. McDonaldcase.com. There is a website that is maintained by Colette's brother, I believe.
Right.
That has put all of the evidence in it.
So he's in jail now. Like, he goes to jail.
Uh-huh.
And then his conviction gets overturned. Correct? And he gets out.
And he gets out, and he's out for a little while, and then the Supreme Court heard arguments about it, and they sent him back.
They said, no, you got to go back to jail.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are a murderer.
Yes. He applied in 2020 for compassionate release because of COVID. He was denied. For one reason, because he refused the vaccine, and they said, don't refuse the vaccine and say you come out because you're scared you'll get COVID. But also, I think he was just trying whatever.
Hey, I mean,
I want to also mention Janet Malcolm's 1990 New Yorker article in which she criticized Joe McGinnis heavily, because she felt like he kind of did a bait and switch on Jeffrey.
Right, like she thinks that he went in thinking that he was guilty and was pretending the whole time just to be close and get the scoop and the book deal and the money.
Yeah. However, he maintains that he went in open-minded, that the contract he had said he could write whatever he felt.
And Mr. McDonald was just crazy enough to think that.
I really feel like that Jeffrey McDonald was handsome and intelligent, and he had made it through his life so far on his good looks and his smarts and lies. And according to Joe McGinnis, you go back and you read about him and his family, that this was not a pattern that was unknown to them.
Right.
And
not the murder part.
No, just the kind of
getting by with your looks
and your smarts, and if you tell something that's not necessarily true, but it helps you. And I think it had served him well up until now. And he's still very charming, and he's still charming people to this day. I feel like Janet Malcolm has been very much charmed by him. His wife, who he's married to now, he's very charming, and I think he's he's used that.
I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that he's guilty. But there's also overwhelming evidence that he's not. Like, if they say that this was lab contamination, why not do the DNA of the lab tech that was handling the samples? I mean, do they just not want to revisit it because he's in jail? So,
I don't know.
Why would you?
There's been a lot of back and forth about it.
And it's horribly sad.
I want to make a case for Joe McGinnis though about him. I feel like he truly felt that Jeffrey was probably innocent when he first got into it, and he met him. I think he was kind of charmed by him and everything. But as time went on, and he got to see more and more of him, and he was at the trial and saw all the evidence, that he truly came to believe him to be guilty. But even if he went in totally believing him guilty and did that to get close and write the book, that's still not wrong. That's still just journalism.
Right. I mean, journalists do that all the time. So
I mean, they do. I mean, they go undercover to find out things, and he could say that that's what he was doing. And if he went in to prove he did it, that still wouldn't really be wrong.
Right.
You know, she made it sound like, oh, he was, betraying his profession and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, no, not really.
Did he do it? Probably yes.
Probably. I would say.
Like, we can only go on what we can read in the media. Like, we weren't at the trial. We didn't see all the evidence. We didn't, but he was convicted in a jury trial. And
I think they had enough evidence, and they had enough, and people really had a hard time finding the motive.
Right. I mean, I think it's more, it seems to me, more lack of evidence that anybody else did it.
There was, he said acid heads come in from the rain in wet boots and stuff and attacked him and his wife and his children and killed them.
They were considerate. They left their shoes at the door.
They wiped off the weapons and left them outside, except for the one knife that he pulled out.
But it was raining. It was raining.
Oh, it could have washed it off.
It could have washed it away.
They wore gloves.
They wore gloves because it was raining. So they didn't want their hands to get cold, so they had gloves on. But they were considerate, left their shoes at the door. That's the reason there were no muddy boot prints or footprints.
I read the book by Joe McGinnis. I didn't read the book by Errol Morris, but I did watch the series, which I know you did too. And I would encourage everybody, look at both sides and
absolutely,
and see how you feel about it. See what you think. It's not up to us. We don't have really a say much in if he's convicted or not. But I feel like that the things that really line up for me is lack of evidence.
I think that's what convicted him.
The lack
of evidence that anybody else
supported
was in
his
the
story.
house.
Number one. Number two, the overkill of the wife and the children compared to his very light wounds.
But then again, that can go back to the acid trip. He was a male. Yeah. They were females.
They were easier to kill?
You're on an acid trip. You could have seen them as anything.
That's true. I'd go back
not that I'm saying that he's innocent, because I don't believe he is, but...
I think what we know nowadays about domestic violence puts another color to it. I feel like this was a domestic violence episode that got out of hand. He decided to... he decided to sacrifice. To me, I feel like he was angry with Colette and beat her. Kristen got in the middle of it and got beat, and he sacrificed Kimberly so he could go on with his life.
Even though I think Kimberly was his favorite.
Kimberly, no, Kristen, the baby was.
Kristen, yeah. He sacrificed Kristen.
And I believe it was Brian Murtaugh, one of the prosecutors against him for the government, that said that he could have, ended it and not killed Kristen, and she could have still been alive, but he chose himself.
He absolutely chose himself.
So I
in every aspect of it. In every aspect of his life, he chose himself. Which,
yeah.
I mean, is not necessarily a bad thing, depending on whether you're murdering people.
I think the other thing that really leans towards him is his father-in-law switching to be against him instead of for him.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he did is he insisted on getting the transcripts of the proceedings against him by the Army.
Military proceedings.
And Jeffrey McDonald hemmed and hawed and tried not to send them to him, and he finally got them. He bothered the Army investigators until they let him go in the house where the crime scene was and go through it and spend some time in there. And when he came out of that house...
Right. And, I mean...
And he looked at the evidence, he said, there's no way, and throw that Dick Cavett show on top of it. To me, also, I don't mean to just judge people, but sometimes when you see somebody say or do something, you can just kind of say, ooh. And have you ever pulled up that Dick Cavett clip?
Yes.
My wife came home and we had a before bedtime drink, really, and watched the beginning of a late night talk show.
He knew how to do it, as we say.
Clip.
Yes, I seen that. It's hard because, that was her father.
Mm-hmm.
And grandfather of the children. Colette's stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
He already had his suspicions when he went into it. So he was going to see what he wanted to see out of the evidence and things. So I get that. Like, I would be the exact same way. Like, if I thought somebody did something, you're going to be able to see that, unless there's just overwhelming evidence that they didn't do it. So, like, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate for, the innocent side, because so many people have been let out because they were innocent.
That's true.
That were convicted on evidence that led to someplace else.
Yeah.
Our system isn't perfect.
No.
But it's what we have, and it's what we use. And we've just got to accept that and continue to try to make it better.
I think, though, because Freddie Kassab, he went in there, though, but he was touting Jeffrey's innocence.
Right, until he wasn't.
Until he wasn't, then he wasn't.
He saw that show, and he's like...
Maybe you were...
Because if he was still saying, he didn't do this, he didn't do this, he didn't do this, then he would have never went and got the transcripts. He would have never went. Because he was thinking...
No, he actually wanted the transcripts when he still thought he was innocent, I believe. I think he wanted all the evidence he could get. He wanted to find the real killers. Maybe. Or maybe he really pushed for him more when he saw the Dick Cavett show.
Mm-hmm.
The Dick Cavett show really did it to him.
Right.
Michael Franzine, I think is his name. He's the ex-mafia guy. He's on YouTube a lot. He's written books and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he met Jeffrey McDonald in prison. He was talking about, whether or not he was guilty or not. And he didn't say, I think he's guilty, or anything like that. And he said, my dad was a wise guy, but he was also a wise person. He said, he told me once, he said, if we go out and we do something, like commit a crime, big or little, no matter what it is, you come back, you just shut up.
Right, you don't talk about it.
And he said, to me, Jeffrey should have shut up. He said, once the military let him go, he should have hushed his mouth. He should have got out of town, kept his head down, just did his job. somebody say something to you, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And he said, you know, if you come back to me 30 minutes later after we've done something and say something about it, I'm going to say,
What?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And he said, but he kept talking about it.
He liked the attention. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
He loved and craved that attention.
Yes.
And he still does.
Yes, he
from,
does.
From prison.
Yeah, he's doing everything he can to get the attention.
Mm-hmm. So.
And that to me is another argument for the guilt, because he's still getting the attention with anybody that will interview him or any kind of thing he can do to get a new trial.
Where's he at? Can we go interview him?
Jeffrey McDonald, it's Stacy and Amanda, and we want to interview you.
We do this series called Crime and Crochet.
And we want to talk to you. Do you crochet while you're here in prison?
Right.
Let us teach you. That'll give you something to do.
It's on my bucket list. Just saying.
What? Interviewing?
Yeah. What makes you a murderer? What makes you do the things you do?
Well, no, he ain't going to tell you.
No, I know.
He's going to say.
But you listen. He doesn't have to tell you, because he's going to tell you. He's not going to come out and say, well, this is what I did and why I did it. But if you listen to him, answer the questions, how he answers the questions, or they, him, her, you know, whoever, you're going to get a little insight into them.
He's in Maryland. He's in a Maryland prison. He's 77. So he's suffering from chronic kidney disease, skin cancer, and high blood pressure. He needs regular dialysis treatments. He wants to be let out because he's been a model prisoner. And
yeah, because he's not in there with women and children.
this is true.
That's why he's a model prisoner.
His second wife lives in Maryland
Mm-hmm.
and would be able to take care of him should he be released. He's cited threats of the COVID-19. And I think this is from last year when he asked to be released. And it was already denied. April 2021. He refused the COVID-19 vaccine, but he did test positive for it in January, so he lived through that. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably guilty. Probably where he needs to be.
I personally, with just what we can see in the media and all that, I say guilty. I say guilty. But I don't know if it was because of evidence or the lack of it. Like, I would have to see all the evidence that they had in the court. Like, have it right in front of me and have it presented to say that the evidence convicted him, or the lack of evidence from his story convicted him.
I think also knowing the type of person he was, what we know nowadays about domestic violence, his knowledge. He had a magazine in his home that was all about the Charles Manson
But who
murders.
didn't at that point?
That's true. But I mean,
For real. I mean,
if it was 1970 and you have just injured your oldest child in a way that's either going to leave her severe deficits or dead, and been in this domestic fight with your wife, yeah, and you've just read about the Charles Manson murders. That's what I think it is it occurs to you, well, we're going to make it look like that.
but that could, I mean,
I feel like if we had
any murder at that time, when they went into their house, they would have a magazine, newspaper, something with that on it, because it was everywhere. So I don't think that has a daggum thing to do.
no,
Like the actual article.
no,
Because you could have seen it on TV, because it was all over TV.
I think though that the fact that
I don't think that that's.
I think the fact that it was the thing that was fresh right then. He knew it.
Right, everybody knew it. I mean,
Yeah, and
I really don't think that that's any kind
I
of
feel
evidence. In my mind, as a juror, I would be like, who didn't know that? You know?
No, but I'd be like, if I was going to, if I had done that, and I was going to try to get out of it, that's how I would do it.
Let's flip that around.
Uh-huh.
Everybody knew about it.
Yeah.
So the murderers that came into the house would know about it. So
They'd be copycats?
Right. They could have copycatted. I mean,
That's true too.
because everybody knew about it. I mean,
Only
that
thing I want to
is-
say though is
that is a
when you talk about the murders, the Charles Manson murders, they went out and murdered famous people, wealthy people, and this was like a little woman on the army base, and yeah, he was a Green Beret and a doctor, but he wasn't making his money yet. You know what I'm saying? They hadn't
Right,
gotten
right.
up
No,
there
I
on social
mean-
climbing yet. So it wasn't like it was this little apartment
mhm.
on base.
But in that little area,
Yeah, he was somebody.
he was somebody. He was the doctor. I mean, that is grounds for being evidence for both sides.
Well, you could take anything and do that, but yeah, I
Well,
think
no, not everything, not anything, but
not everything, but a lot
like-
of things.
like his shirt
True. We hadn't mentioned the shirt.
that was laid over her body that had the stab wounds in it. You could fold that any which way to match up with her stab wounds. If you folded that just perfect, you could match up her stab wounds to
Which is what they did,
right,
and that was evidence against him.
right, which makes no sense to me at all. Like,
I don't know. I think it leads it.
what makes more sense is not like folding it like, okay, let me put a bunch of holes in something, I can fold it and match. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Anybody could do that. It's the fibers
the fibers
that were
under
left
her-
on the body
Yeah,
that gets me, like, not just fell off. Like, they were on the body.
They weren't in the living room where he said the struggle
Right.
took place. They were under her.
Right, under her body.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, as an emergency physician, did he roll her to see if she had any wounds on her back? I mean, but then, if you want to say that, then pulling the knife out wouldn't make sense. You know, a lot of things don't make sense in the case.
No.
But I think he's guilty
Yeah.
because it doesn't make any sense to me that anybody else would do it. But I can also see why his following could make a case against him being guilty. You know,
Yeah.
I can see why he has people that think he's innocent. I can see. Now, personally, me, I don't. I think he's guilty.
You
I
know,
think he did it. I think he should be in prison
one thing I think
till he dies. But
is true, because there are people who argue that Scott Peterson's innocent, and certain people are. Scott Peterson is handsome. Jeffrey McDonald was handsome. They don't never think anybody ugly is innocent. It's always the good looking ones.
I
It's
would be
like-
so guilty.
It's those good looking ones. They're like, oh,
I
he's
would
innocent.
be so guilty.
And it's the women that are like, oh no, he didn't do it. He's innocent. That's what I think.
I understand why people would think. Like, it's not only just women that think he's innocent. And I don't think he was all that handsome. But, that's just...
When he was younger, he was better looking.
In
He
a
was,
70-ish kind of way, I guess.
You're younger than me. See, I was young in the 70s, and that long hair and them sideburns.
I was born in 1970, so.
I was born in 64. In fact, I was born the same year Kimberly McDonald was born. She'd be my age if she was alive. And I was her age at 1970.
Sad. It's sad to look and see what her life could have been.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it is. It's so sad. And
for the family, it's sad.
it is very sad.
But anyway, let's see what you've got done here.
Not much. I've been talking more than crocheting.
I got one more little motive done.
All right.
I think that I'm going to make the rest of my big ones and put them together, and then save the little ones for last. I just wanted to see what it was going to look like.
Oh, I love it. It's so pretty. I might have to make this pattern. I'm going to get a copy.
It was a free pattern.
It's from Yarn Inspirations.
Yes.
Oh, I'll be getting that pattern.
It's free.
It's like through.
Awesome. And you can, it tells you what colors you get, but you can do any color.
Oh, you want. I love the pink and brown. It's lovely.
I did the opposite.
Oh.
I did the pink on the inside here and the brown on the outside. And it's supposed to be the same here. Pink on the inside and brown on the outside. But I wanted it contrasting. So I think it looks better that way.
I love it. I think it's beautiful. I do.
And it's so soft.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's beautiful.
I don't know why I'm making it. I'm just making it.
Because it's pretty and we like pretty things.
And I don't keep pretty. I don't keep them.
You give them away.
I give them away. I don't keep them. I don't know where this is going.
I've been keeping more stuff.
I think that's what I meant. I don't know where.
You don't know who's going to belong to yet.
Right.
I've been keeping more stuff here lately than I used to. I really am, but I still give things away. But I've been doing more and keeping more.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and we'll come back again soon with another crime and some more crochet.
And hopefully I'll be farther along.
Me too. We'll have to let you know. We're going to kind of discuss now and see what other case we might pick around.
There's quite a few.
There's Chris Watts, who we know is guilty. We would have to argue about whether or not he is. There's Scott Peterson, who we
argument.
There's Michael Peterson, and there's Drew Peterson. We could do the Peterson.
Ooh, the Peterson.
Never marry a man named Peterson, in my opinion.
The Peterson series. That's
the Peterson series. That does, don't it? Yep. I think Scott and Drew are in prison. I'm not sure about Michael Peterson. But yeah, very interesting, very interesting. So,
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.